Hello, everybody. How are we all doing on this fine day? There may be no football to speak about, but this is Manchester United we are discussing, and there's always something to speak about with this football club. First things first, how is everything stateside, Mr. Brown? You doing well?
I'm going to lie to you and say everything's wonderful.
It's best you keep all that to yourself and just tell everyone about the good things.
Well, I'm going to lie to you. No, everything's great. I'm healthy, upright, can't complain.
Well, you're looking sharp anyway. You're looking well.
Thank
You
you.
have a fine hat in your head there today. No, we may have been devoid of any Premier League action, but there was a small matter of some European affairs ongoing. Now, I know that we will always attempt to be as impartial as is humanly possible when it comes to United's rivals on this podcast. But surely opting to sit back for anywhere between, 114, 115 minutes probably wasn't the most advisable thing against Paris Saint-Germain. You know, before we actually speak about the match, I have to share one stat that I was desperate to tweet, but I just knew it would be very conniving of me to do so. You know, everybody was speaking about Declan Rice at that game, and he finished the game with a minus 2.4 ball progression. So he brought the ball backwards, 2.4 total ball progression throughout the game, and yet people are screaming that this is a Ballon d'Or winner. I know they managed to hold out until penalties, but that was about as turgid a European spectacle as we could have imagined, wasn't it?
It was. Did you say Ballon d'Or?
Yeah, apparently he's a Ballon d'Or winner.
It's funny to say, I was just talking. I actually won the fucking Ballon d'Or winner, but sorry. I don't know if that was a directive that was given to Declan Rice to not progress forward, because it looks like to me Arteta went out there with a very defensive. I'll be honest, Shaun, I don't think there was many ways Arsenal could win that game. I sympathize a bit with Arteta in the sense that Arsenal have never won this competition. They've lost finals before. Your only job is to make sure you win, and no one will forget. No one will remember how you did it. But every once in a while, you get a team that's so incredibly negative that they leave an indelible mark. If you go back to the Euros in '92, Denmark was so negative that it caused a rule change for back passes.
Go on, Peter Schmeichel. You up there, that.
And as a result of how they won, football decided we can't have this ever again. So we can't reward this type of football. And I think there's some type of cosmic justice in not having a team. Like Arsenal would have tried to play for corners instead of penalties, right? Because you're talking about a team that's won a shithouse of competition, which is fine. But I don't think if they'd have opened up against PSG. I mean, you heard João Neves talk about this, that everything was in front of them. Arsenal weren't committing to going forward, and I think if they had with João Neves, Vitinha, Dembele, and stuff, I think they would have taken Arsenal. They would have won that game relatively simple. But I think the right team won, and if you look at the players 1 to 11, 1 to 11. I mean, it's not a great Arsenal team, is it, Shaun?
Do you not think so?
No, how many players would you want out of their team?
If I'm being totally honest and unbiased, yeah. I mean, I would look at their starting 11, I suppose the best starting 11. I don't buy into this David Raya conversation about being the best goalkeeper. He is good and he has improved a lot, but I still would take Senne Lammens over him. When I look at their back line, I think it's fair to say Saliba and Gabriel are two extremely good.
Sure.
Two extremely good central. I know they have a lot of traits that I really don't like. I mean, but that's the petulance and the dark arts. It's part and parcel of the game, and they're extremely good. I mean, Declan Rice, I know I've just labelled him with a terrible statistic, but he is a very good footballer. I don't think he's quite as good as he's been made out to be, but he is a very good footballer. And, I mean, Saka.
I don't even think Saka. Those are the players I'm thinking. Right? I think Marcus Rashford's a better player than Saka. And Marcus Rashford, was kicked out of Manchester United. I look at that team, and I think if you look at their 2 games against United, the one thing that separates them was a bad goalkeeper. And once that was corrected, United went and hit them for 3 at the Emirates in Michael Carrick's first away game, right?
Very fortuitous to get away with that goal with that went in off Martinez that day as well, because there was a bit of roughhousery from Timber in the box, wasn't there?
Even if you go back to previous games, United beat them in the FA Cup. The penalty decision against Rasmus Højlund, which is every single time I look at that, that just defies belief.
Yeah,
that's a penalty, right? And Ten Hag never shot about it, like, to be fair. But even the game at Old Trafford, United should have had a clear-cut penalty on Cunha in the 1-0 one with Bandier. I mean, he makes playing with 10 men. I still can't understand how United started the season with that lad, and that's no disrespect to him. But I'm being overly critical and harsh there, but I just don't think that his physique and game, his attributes are suited to the Premier League. Arsenal are the worst football club to play against if you have an unreliable goalkeeper. They're going to put everything on top of a team that never conceded a penalty all season, and they want to complain about not getting a penalty in the final.
I know.
I'm sorry, but at some point, that luck's going to run out. And honestly, the fact that they've won the league, the turmoil at City, gives me renewed optimism going into this season.
Yeah, well, I suppose very similar to us. A lot will depend on what they actually get done in the summer. If they're going to be a serious football club now, they have to have real aspirations to attack the summer window and really bolster maybe 3-4 positions, because they have the money there now. And if they are going to be anyway ambitious towards doing it, that now is the time to really strike. But you mentioned by India, and you are right to say it. Whether or not you're being harsh is irrelevant. I mean, I think he's a capable goalkeeper. I don't think he's good enough to be a Manchester United goalkeeper. But when I was writing about Senne Lammens yesterday, I stated that because Senne Lammens didn't make his debut until game week 7, that really typifies the nature of issues that can be caused if you don't get your business done early enough in the summer window. And I know opinions in football are as relevant as farts in the wind, but everybody has them, and there's very few of them that get through. But as we discussed plenty on this podcast, the words of former heroes, they have had quite the impact throughout the season. But when you consider Lammens was written off before he kicked a ball because of his transfer fee, if you remember Paul Scholes having a go about the minuscule transfer fee, that means he can't be a good player, it makes all the more sweeter that he be awarded the Premier League's transfer of the season. And it really goes above and beyond when you look at just how assured he has been as a 23-year-old with only one season of Belgian football under his belt. It's remarkable. And really, it's a pain he wasn't there from day one, wasn't it?
I mean, I think one of the things that makes Lammens special is his temperament. I think there's goalkeepers with that fundamental skill set that maybe Lammens has, but his temperament, he makes a mistake, doesn't fall apart in the game. There's not a second one. He gets comedically corrected. He doesn't look flustered. He's very secure mentally, his confidence, everything. He's just someone that you can trust. The temperament. I read about I think Ferguson saying that he would never pick an emotional defender, because that type of recklessness is very costly. You can get away with that as a striker, but you can't get away with that as a defender. You need mental composure, especially with what's in behind the defense, because that's what gives the back 4, back 5 the trust and the confidence to play a certain way, to play a higher line, to take different risks, and it removes the nervousness from their defending. I think when you're picking out best signing, it's not just what they did, it's how transformative they've been to the team that they went. And you could draw a very straight line between the signing of Lammens and United's improvement, and how causal that was. What a signing.
What a signing. And, I have the figures embedded in here now because I was only writing about it. And obviously you have the 8 clean sheets. But when people really dive into it and look at the metrics of it, Phil, that he prevented 6.7 expected goals. That is some absolute revelation. And when I looked further back into it, his comments when he first signed for the football club, they really stand clear, because for a guy to be so young and to be so questioned by, like as I said, Scholesy, not to draw reference on him, but the fact that there's a club legend openly referencing his doubt and his hesitism about a young player coming in, that he said he was confident he could come in and he could positively impact the dressing room and the squad. Like, if that is not the definition of what every player should be from here on forward, I don't know what it is.
I mean, to me, it's just stupid rationale from Paul Scholes.
Mm.
I mean, what did you need to pay for Schmeichel? 600 grand?
Yeah, it was pennies. Yeah.
Yeah, and relative to the time, that was still pennies. What did you need to pay for Cantona? 1.2 million?
Yeah, something around that. Yeah,
Yeah.
not too far off it.
3.5 for King. This is I expect better from Paul Scholes than making that type of assessment based on what United paid for him.
I know.
You know what United got him at a price because he was playing in the Belgian league, and obviously there's a risk coming from the Belgian league to the Premier League and how they adapt all that. But you know, the alternative is Emi Martinez. Who would I rather have?
Oh yeah, and I mean, like, it's a fantastic testament to, you know, there's a lot of things you can question, but it's a fantastic testament to the individuals that are bringing in these players, that they could identify and back their data to be able to do so. But I want to move away from him ever so slightly because, you know, it's not too often I can say this, but the good vibes just don't stop with Senne Lammens. You know, because we now have a 19-year-old full Scottish international who has played 17 minutes of senior football for the club, whose character and commitment have now gone and earned a place in the Scottish World Cup squad. You know, whether Tyler Fletcher features is irrelevant to me because the experience that he's going to gain is just going to be absolutely superb. But how good is it that we can see this type of advancement for an academy player who has such aspirations of an advanced senior role next season?
Oh, it's massive. I mean, Steve Clark's not picking him to do Gavin Fletcher a favour, right?
Oh.
And Steve Clark had some decent alternatives to Tyler Fletcher. The fact that you're going to a World Cup with Scotland, get some experience in a tournament, get some experience being away with pros, get some experience at that level, bring that back to United. That's going to give him an enormous confidence boost to and his self-belief that he can make it at United, and United need that to happen. It's also, Shaun, what an incentive. If you're a young player at United, right, and you're looking at that going, here's an amazing opportunity, how quickly your life can turn around. And here's Alejandro Garnacho, who, young player, leaves United, is not going to the World Cup. Here's a young player breaking through at United, barely kicked the ball, and is going to the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
United is a risky football club to leave from, but you look at Kobbie Mainoo, you know, Kobbie Mainoo stays after Ruben Amorim. Now he's going to a World Cup. You look at Phil Foden, not going. Right? I think there's an example to young players. Leave Man United at your peril. It's still the best place to be, and that is a very encouraging sign for United next season with young Fletcher to get him into a World Cup, and you know there's opportunities there for him.
God, there is, yeah, and it's like something I'm trying to ram home to so many people when I'm speaking to them on social media. You say what you will about young players and reserve team players, but they don't just hand out a reserve team player of the year award just because it's Darren Fletcher's son. This is a guy who is held very, very highly. And to be given that nod to go over, it's just, I mean, I love it because, you know, I've had time to be able to speak with people that work with him on a daily basis. And all they have ever said is just how its maturity is probably the biggest thing that's said, because it's like an old head on young shoulders. And, you know, he's not phased. I remember I wasn't actually speaking at the time, but you're going back probably about 2 years. And I remember reading a report. It was after a Premier League 2 game. And he had performed very well. And there was other players in the squad that were getting a lot of incentive. You know, they were getting a lot of plaudits for their attacking output, whereas he was going under the radar. But yet all of the coaching teams spoke openly and honestly about how they wouldn't be surprised if he was the one who was going to make the breakthrough, not because of the real flashy attacking bravado that's going on with his teammates, but the fact that he goes about things so calmly, nothing affects him, and he can positively impact the game in several different midfield positions. I'm not saying that this is a guy who's going to save us 60 million quid this summer, but when you're looking at a squad that needs to have multiple players to be able to contend with various cup competitions, this is a real positive. Even if you can get 5-10 minutes off the bench, or if he could be rotated at a time where you're winning 2 or 3-0,
Yeah.
it's massively advantageous for Michael Carrick, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, Darren Fletcher made sure these his twin boys were at one of the best academies in the country, if not the best at cities, because he's very conscious of not, you know, getting allegations of nepotism and stuff. And anyone that's ever coached their own kid knows it's a tightrope between showing them, not showing them too much favoritism, but not going out of your way to prove you're not showing them favoritism by picking on them. It's a hard thing to do. So their progress is legitimate. And I know, I'm sure Fletcher was reticent about bringing him over to United because of this very thing. They've earned the right to be in the first team. United have definitely shown pick players in the past that have got first team appearances as a result of who they know. I'm like Oliver Gill and stuff, right? There's no question, right? Where you get thrown into a first team game on the last game of the season on the league it's already won, fine. That's not what's happened. Exceptional talent, and from a personal preferential perspective, I still prefer to see a young kid graduate from the academy into the first team than going out and making a sign-in. Both of them are tremendous grounds for optimism, but I think in an unfair world, to see progress being rewarded, opportunities being provided for young players to come from a youth team into the first team and change their lives. It's one of the few areas where there's continuity and opportunity, because it's so rare that it usually is nepotism, cronyism that gets people into these positions. But it's nice to see the fact that some level of meritocracy still exists.
Yeah, and the fact that we can really buy back, it might be corny and some people might not like hearing it, but the whole adage of it, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And that's the way it should be. And not only is he going to benefit massively from what he inherits from a Scottish squad that are going to be as clued in as they possibly can, he'll get time around Scott McTominay, who knows what it's like to succeed at Manchester United. But then to come back and have a pre-season with the first team that's going to have players like Lammens and Cunha, Mbumo, Sesko, all guys that have had a really positive debut season under their belt, guys that moved to the football club because they wanted to play for Manchester United. It's all about building that positive character. And, something I drew on a moment ago when I said about the sporting department, that they've maybe earned a bit of trust based on the business that they have done thus far. I've been reporting on two midfielders, two outfield players for the past week, and we will get to them in a bit. But before that, I do want to speak about something, because we've seen fresh reports this morning, I think it was from The Athletic, about a consideration for Newcastle's Lewis Hall.
Yeah.
21 years of age, Phil. Another young lad closing in on 100 Premier League appearances as a very good top-tier left-back. Assuming the glaring holes in midfield can be addressed, as I assume they will and what I'm told they will, how excited are you about the prospect of bringing in somebody of the talent of the likes of Lewis Hall?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because you remember Shaun Longstaff and
I do, yeah.
The attitude, I think it was Longstaff, Newcastle had towards selling to United as a rival, right? And the fact that they've got the Barcelona money for Anthony Gordon makes me wonder, what's the need to sell? And will he actually sell to United? I'd love to see him come to United. I was surprised he was left out of the World Cup squad. Need a left back. He's young. He's English. He's Premier League ready. I don't think Diego Leon or Harry Amas are ready to step up, and I think both of those need a loan. Obviously, Amas got injured when he was out on loan. But and then of course there's the question as to whether Patrick Dorgu fills in left back. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think Lewis Hall would very much depend on how much they're going to spend on the midfield and whether they have targets secured, prices secured, and know how to balance that budget. But yeah, I'd love to see him United.
Makes the topic of conversation about Sandro Tonali all that more interesting, doesn't it? When you're looking at a guy who is every bit as important, and given his age, is probably a pretty crucial member of that Newcastle dressing room. how they're even getting themselves into a situation where Manchester United are coming knocking and doing what the club used to do years ago, that regardless of how important this player is to a domestic rival, if we want him, we're going to take him. And I'm not saying that we're going to come in and we're going to just take Connolly and we're going to take Lewis Hall, but the fact that the reports are there, these are genuine individuals that I trust, people that I know that are reporting these things. And with that, there's no smoke without fire. So if United are going in there and they do have the allure and these players are having their heads turned, that's another fantastic sign from Michael Carrick and this squad to be able to boost and build upon it moving forward, isn't it?
Mate, United are obviously going out of their way to attract them. I mean, didn't they just sign a sponsorship for their training ground with a betting sponsor? I'm sorry. Giving fucking Kurt Zuma a bunch of kittens. It's
I cannot control him when he's like this, people. He's in very contrary for him today. I cannot control him.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a fiery start before we come on here, so I was deliberately antagonized. But I think Connolly, I listened to some Newcastle fans describe him, and I have to take out with a pinch of salt, obviously, because it's a player that wants out, and inevitably you're going to focus on the negatives. Again, question enormous amounts of money. I think where United have to get better, Shaun, is not buying from other Premier League teams, because the prices are just exorbitant, right?
You don't like buying from Premier League teams. You don't like that.
I think United have to be better at being able to buy players from abroad that can comfortably integrate to the Premier League, because it's a different acquisition cost buying from European clubs around the world than buying from a Premier League club. And you just financially not sustainable to keep doing that. Again, when we talk about academy players, this is something, it saves United an absolute fortune if you can get an academy player into the first team that can consistently play at that level, because it's not just playing for United, it's playing at a Premier League level. So when you want to go buy another midfielder or another player, it's not just buying a player, it's buying a player that's Premier League ready, which is cost enormous amounts of money. The other thing is when you're calculating United's budget, you're essentially calculating it over 2 windows, because United don't spend in January. Most clubs, this is a summer transfer budget, and then we have our January transfer budget. So when you calculate United's budget over 2 windows, it's not exorbitant in relative to other football clubs. So I think that United will record. I mean, if you listen to like Laurie Whitwell and stuff, he's very well informed. United are looking for 3 midfielders. So it'd be interesting to see how they find the resources, Shaun, for Lewis Hall and Senne Lammens, which I think they're going to sign players from Newcastle. It'll be one, not both.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, this is something that it's common knowledge. Transfer season is silly season for a reason, and that's why I've been a massive advocate in what you're saying by going abroad. Look at Sevilla. You've got Lucien Agome. Now, he's a player that I know the club have liked for several months. I reported back in February that there was an intense scouting dossier put through on the player, and he's a player that Sevilla could offload for about 30 million euros. That is a shrewd deal. But these are the shrewd deals that will ultimately benefit the starting 11, which will then ultimately benefit the squad. And that's obviously crucial ahead of a congested schedule. We're speaking about midfield now, and you're stating about the 3 midfielders that Laurie Whitwell is speaking about. From everything that I have been advised about this, we're looking at really 2 midfielders. And if Manuel Ugarte does go, then that's obviously where you get your 3rd midfielder from. Ederson and Mateus Fernandes appear to be the 2 that we're moving for right now. And both offer an entirely different dynamic to the midfield.
Yeah.
One of them obviously Premier League proven. One of them maybe going into that shrewd category because of what he has had in Italy and Serie A. But both of them are really, they're splitting the fan base. One of them on ability or potential ability, the other one of them on the amount that we're going to have to pay a relegated team to be able to pry him away from, given his age and his contractual status. Ederson is looking like, about 35 million pounds is kind of the region that you could be talking, 35 with add-ons. Whereas Mateus Fernandes, you're probably talking more towards 50 million. Now, if you're to believe the nature of makeup and financial standing within the football club, being able to bring in a player for about 35, then being able to bring in another player for 50, that then allows a little bit of leeway to look towards what would be like your marquee acquisition. And from that particular point, and that's something that the supporters can get excited about, because you can then start looking at other positions. But if you're focusing specifically on what you know about Ederson and Mateus Fernandes, are they two players that excite you when considering Kobbie Mainoo, Bruno Fernandes, and potentially Tyler Fletcher as the other options there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Ederson, I can't give you any educated assessment on. I mean, I just don't watch enough of Serie A to give you anything worthwhile. I've read about him. I've, tried to do a bit of research on what his strengths and weaknesses are. He's a player that obviously he's down to the last year of his contract, which is affecting the price. You look at the contrast between 27-year-old Ederson, who's playing every week in Serie A for a decent team, Atalanta. And then we're talking Mateus Fernandes, who allegedly West Ham are looking more than twice as much for that young lad. Look, West Ham can ask for whatever they want. But it depends on who Mateus Fernandes is going to go to. And if there's another alternative bidder for Mateus Fernandes, who he would go to, that's offering significantly more than Manchester United, then you can ask for whatever you want. This is a similar problem with Marcus Rashford. This club's interested, that club's interested. Well, Marcus has to want to go there.
Yeah.
Human beings are allowed to pick who their employer is. Like, imagine your employer selling you to your competition down the street for 35 mil, saying away, and you go, oh, well, what do I have to say in this? These are human beings. So it all depends on where he wants to go to. I like the likes of Mateus Fernandes. I was reading about him. I've seen bits and pieces of him. I think he got 3 goals, 4 assists this season, but he's very, very good in picking up, creating play from deep, picking up a ball in tight areas. Technically very good, but like Kobbie in that sense, where he's very aesthetically balanced, very, very good at picking up stuff from deep. Ruben Amorim tried to get Fernandes to be in that role where he was dropping deep and creating from deep land positions. So I think that he, from what I've seen, very, very good player. I think you could get him around 60, 70 million, which I think is a fair price. With add-ons, that's the deal you should do. You need to have a lot of flexibility financially. This summer, they paid down some of their revolving credit facility, and they've significantly shaved the wage bill by moving on Casemiro, of course, Rasmus Højlund. I don't know if they have the money for Højlund yet, but I'll be deposited anytime soon. And then there's some other players. Hopefully, they can get Onana sold. And one player I am interested in looking forward to seeing is how well young Orozco adapts.
Who did you say? I didn't catch that.
And Christian Orozco, the young Colombian midfielder that they've signed.
Yeah.
How well he adapts. Spoken to people who have knowledge of football in that particular region, and he's very, very well thought of. Inevitably, creating comparisons with Moises Caicedo, but very interested. Again, if you're someone like Orozco or any of these young players, you have to see United's need as an opportunity.
Well, you see, if he can come in and he can hit the ground running and he can adapt, coming from not just another country, but a different continent, a different way of life, different climate, and if he can somehow adapt quickly and he can come in and grow into a player that could give you a large proportion of what you're seeing from Moises Caicedo, and obviously you have a win. But one of the biggest things I've spoken about in taking on the South American market for years, I've been saying this for years, because obviously through your sources and who you know and who you previously spoke with, when you're looking at the old sporting department and you're looking at the previous commercial opportunities that were taken over sporting opportunities, the South American market was continuously ignored. There's numerous options throughout the years. You're looking at Julian Alvarez at the moment, who's probably going to go for 3 figures. United could have purchased him for an absolute pittance when he was younger, but the South American market was continuously ignored. And when you're looking about these opportunities that we're now taking and bringing the likes of Orozco, if they don't work, it hasn't cost a massive amount and there's going to be a sell-on fee. So it's almost going into that category of of a no risk, because ultimately, if it doesn't work, you haven't invested tremendous amount that you're not going to recoup, and in all likelihood, you could potentially recoup more than you actually paid in the first place. So these are the type of things we should be doing.
Yeah, and I think this is where Vavell is really going to help United and has been helping United. He's given United a scouting focus that's analogous to what he had at Chelsea, to what he had at Leipzig and what have you, where very active in those markets. You have a lot of ground to make up in those markets because they are saturated, and it's a lot of skullduggery in those markets between changing hands and contracts that are written in certain ways. And everyone wants the cheap South American kid that turns into a superstar. So United have. We're talking about this kid Bellinho and stuff this morning. You look at Diego Leon, you look at other players. United are very heavily scouting now and trying to get ahead in that market. But I think a key aspect of getting players from that market is having the Chelsea Strasbourg model, the feeder club model, because Portugal's done an amazing job of taking players, and it's an off ramp before you get to the top clubs in Europe. It's a wonderful transitional point. You come to Portugal, you get to adapt to Europe, you get to adapt to life away from home, and then you make the next step. But the Portuguese clubs sell those players for an enormous amount of money, so these English clubs want to get control of that player, go to their feeder club, get the same experience, and then come. So I think that's aren't Nice in a relegation fight?
Yeah.
And I think Ratcliffe's trying to sell them. I think he still has Lausanne, where Coney went, and last I read he wasn't playing that much. I think you need to have an intermediate football club if they're going to really go after that South American market, because United should be getting players like Esteval.
Well, this is something that's been spoken about a lot, about setting up academies or setting up institutions over in South America that are almost like the GA's equivalent of, centers of excellence that you can
Yeah.
use as these feeders, and you can really, really sort of advance in that market. And if you do get a young, talented player that can benefit you in the first team, great. If you don't, you have this conveyor belt of profit coming in and out of the football club. And something you spoke about with Matías Fernandez there a moment ago, that if it did end up being around 60 or 70 million, that you think it would be a suitable figure given the add-ons. This is another conversation that I have pretty regularly, because a lot of people start getting squeamish, especially if you think Fernandez, when West Ham are after getting relegated, and they think, how can you pay 60 or 70 million pounds for a guy who's not even in the Premier League? People need to realize that you're talking about age, you're talking about contract, you're talking about current ability and potential. But if United get a flat fee and a figure of 45, 50 million, I think a lot of people would be okay with that. If it is a situation that arises to 65 or 70 million through add-ons, then it means the transfer has been a success for the football club.
Yeah.
And that can only benefit Manchester United in moving forward, no?
Yeah, because the add-ons are a fraction of what you generate. So I want them to meet that. People talk about, oh, he could go to Real Madrid in a couple of years. Well, I'd rather he was a potential signing for Real Madrid in a couple of years than a potential signing for Galatasaray. Because what will we do without the Turks taking off our players that Onana and stuff? We need somewhere, right? So then, if a couple of years from now Real Madrid are looking at him and not Fenerbahce, then it's been a success. And what they say that with all the respect in the world for Turkish football clubs, because they are amazing, But look, I think if you get Matías Fernandez for that type of price, for around the 55, 60 million mark, I think that's a fair price. And what I'm just looking at is a midfield. Obviously, Carlos Balaba's in the discussion too, of Matías Fernandez, Ederson, and Bruno Fernandes. Are we getting Casemiro level goals from that midfield?
I think this probably the onus falls on the shoulders of Kobbie Mainoo with something like that.
Well, what, plus 29 more goals this season than they did the season before.
It's like, I'm pretty sure we discussed something like this maybe 5, 6, 7 weeks ago, because someone even asked on Twitter yesterday, they were asking for my opinion on a player, and is this a direct replacement for Casemiro? And I just responded and said, can you truly replace Casemiro? I don't think there is some players that could probably come in and maybe replace him, but very, very few. And I don't think United are going to be able to replace him in one go. You see people and they suggest that bringing in Ederson is seen as a direct replacement for Casemiro. Then you look at players the likes of Carlos Baleba, and he's another one that really splits the fan base after what has been a pretty poor season. You know what you're saying about the transfer fee for Fernandes being maybe 60, 70 million. If United were to drop 60 million on Carlos Baleba, how would you feel about that?
Shaun, I'm not convinced. To me, like, I need to be more convinced about Carlos Baleba on any capacity as a footballer before we talk about a fee, and I'm just not yet.
You're not convinced in him whatsoever?
Well, I'm not unconvinced. I'm just indifferent. I think that to get a move to Manchester United at that price, you can't do it off the back of a bad season. I think you have, because that's a significant body of work that is definitive and inferential. I think if you're going to get a move to Manchester United, you can get away with a bad season and move to Manchester United if your previous 5 or 6 have been exceptional. Or okay, you can afford, you can write a bad season off. But why is this season less definitive than the previous season? Are we going to turn around and write off his failures as an accident, but his successes or not? Like, I would also have some question marks. Elliot Anderson's had to deal with speculation all season and had to deal with I'm leaving Forest at the end of the season. It never affected his performances. So Carlos Baleba with the tenuous link to United, where they never really showed their teeth. Like, if you listen to Amorim, one of the complaints Amorim had was that he felt that United were making token efforts for certain players. And had never really any intention of really going after them and signing them. And they might be correct on that. I'm going, if I'm Carlos Baleba and I'm seeing what happened with United, I'm going out of my way to prove that I'm a Manchester United, that I should be playing for Manchester United at the end of the season. I will say this. When I was watching him in the last game of the season, I felt like he was a player that was trying to impress.
Yeah.
You can see he's trying to impress here, which is, endearing.
I didn't think he was too bad either. But
I didn't that game at all.
Another player that went out there and I think tried to impress is someone that we had quite a conversation on. I'd nearly even go as far as to say it was a debate, one of the very few debates we have. That was Adam Wharton. What about Adam Wharton in his European final? I think he really got a lot of people sitting up as to his quality in terms of how he controlled that. Forget the opponent, forget the competition. It's going out in a major European final and delivering. And, I think he's really set his stall ahead of a big move this summer.
I think he needs to apologize to his mother as well. Face bastard. Right? I mean, that sort of annoyed me a bit. There's certain things where you behave a certain way that makes you more endearing, and who was it I was watching? He was linked to United. I think I wanted him more as a result of him being a bit of a wrong'un. Who was it? Who was it? I can't remember. But I'm looking at Wharton's face after being reminded of his mum. Well, she likes to tell everyone she's Adam Wharton's mum. So, he's singing, and it looks like he took it personal. I'm like, is that the type of character I want in United's dressing room?
Well, I think this stems back into the wider conversation about the systematic issue that's happened over the last few years with that toxic dressing room. And I think it's quite evident that character is going above all. It goes back into the thing. I don't want to sound repetitive like this old uncle who repeats the same stories every single week we speak, but it's every player that's going to come to Manchester United has got ability, Phil. I think that's, so when it comes to character and having the right stuff to integrate into this dressing room is the biggest thing. So I would imagine that the data team have done their work, and if they were pushing truly for a move for Adam Wharton, that they would
Yeah.
have that established. That he's the right stuff to come in and integrate and mingle with this team. But I'm looking at it totally from an ability perspective with him, because this is a conversation we had, and what was it about? We were saying, would he classify as a marquee signing?
Mhm.
So since we have spoken about that, has he changed ability-wise on the field in terms of what you feel could be a marquee signing for a top-tier Premier League football club?
With Wharton?
With Wharton, yeah.
I don't think he's a marquee signing.
You don't?
No, I don't think there's anything about Adam Wharton that is exciting. And maybe that's his biggest compliment, right? I don't. I think he's a good signing, but I don't think he's a marquee signing. I don't think he's a signing that you would say he'd walk into any top club in the world. Do you know what I mean? I think for to be a marquee signing, it has to be someone that he's the figurehead of your football club in a lot of ways, and that gets the immediate respect of the opposition, and that because he's so obviously good. Like I can look at Real Madrid, I can look at Barcelona, I can look at Liverpool, even City. There's marquee signings in their teams that are obviously top class. Adam Wharton hasn't proved that yet.
Okay, so the jury is still out stateside about Adam Wharton. I saw this is moving away from the players slightly. Just popped into my head. I saw you had a tweet earlier asking for feedback about your moment of the season.
Yes.
Ironically, we get a lot of questions, as it's something we state about every single week. And I had to bring this one to you. You'll understand the significance because it came from a guy with the greatest name imaginable. It was James Connolly. And he asked the question, the same thing a couple of days ago, about what was the moment of the season, and it brought me back to the last episode of Red News, because instead of like large feature pieces in Red News, it was more so small contributions answering little questions. And the moment of the season was asked in that as well. Obviously, the downer of the season was asked also. But in terms of the moment of the season for me, I don't think it's changed since then, because Harry Maguire's header against Liverpool to beat them after how much we have endured against that crowd for several years, but to beat them at Anfield, especially after that, I think it was the first time since Louis van Gaal that we had actually beaten him at Anfield. To me, that was the standout moment of the season. And I'm not saying we had this silverware laden season that it's like we're just picking and choosing, but that was a fantastic moment for me. Where are you on it? Are you the same? Or are you different? Or how are you set?
No, that was my moment. Shaun, look, Liverpool are United's biggest rivals. Not City, not Arsenal, Liverpool. There's a certain type of bitterness I have towards Liverpool that I don't have towards City. And that in another way is a compliment to Liverpool, because I can't discredit Liverpool's success. I can be completely indifferent to City's because it just doesn't feel authentic.
It's not real.
Yeah, everyone knows that this is a result of being propped up by funding. There's nothing organic here. Like, the City owners could have bought Leighton Orient and they'd be in the same position eventually, right? You can't be successful with money alone, but you can't be successful without it, right? It's just as simple as that. You can waste it, but if you invest it properly, you will win. And I also firmly believe that City, one of my biggest regrets in life, mate, there's a guy called Shaun. He used to play for QPR, and I know Shaun personally. I had Shaun in my house, sitting there drinking tea with me. I never asked him, did QPR throw that game? Because I think they did.
Remind me here now with Shaun Derry. Shaun Derry was playing with QPR around kind of 02, 03 kind of way, wasn't it?
Well, no, he played in that City QPR game where
he played with the Aguero game.
Yeah, he played in that game.
Yeah.
Brilliant
guy.
Right?
What age was he then?
In his 30s.
Yeah.
And then he was Crystal Palace's academy director for a while. Brilliant guy, by the way.
He was knocking around for quite a long time though, wasn't he?
Yeah. But footballers like that, they've solid 15-year careers. I know the stories they have for them. Anyway, I just want everyone to know how Shaun Derry was drinking tea. So
And he didn't even give you anything off the record, no?
I should have asked him. But I still think there's a lot of open questions about City's success that they've been helped along the way. And whether they like it or not, it taints the record of people whose reputation is legitimized by what they achieved at City, right? So, we had this question mark about Guardiola. Who's better, Guardiola or Ferguson? Fuck, I'm sorry if these non sequiturs, but Guardiola hasn't won a European Cup with a team that isn't under investigation for cheating. Barcelona are under investigation for referees. These are significant charges. And City could have litigated this and settled this case a long time ago, so Guardiola isn't staying by it. Matt Busby, within 10 years of losing 8 of his first team players and almost his own life, won the European Cup. 10 years.
Pulled himself off his deathbed to do so.
It took Abu Dhabi 15 years to do it, right? And he did it with a significant number. He got there the semi-final in 58 with Busby Babes youth players, supplemented was a couple of signings, then went and redid it again with youth players being the cornerstone of his team. So I don't want to hear this. And by the way, all this ticky-tack, what do you think Brian Clough was playing at Forest in the early 90s? Right? 80s, football on the ground. Right? These are not new concepts. But I think that I forgot the question, but Ferguson's better than Guardiola. Brain works in weird ways, man. Sorry.
Look, another thing we put it out across social media, and this is something we can discuss now as well, because you're speaking about success, and one of the things we put out across social media earlier on was what can be distinguished as success for this football team, this manager, this coaching team next season. And I was interested to see that the majority of the responses were kind of fixated on consolidating third place, progression to the knockout stages in European competition, and a domestic run in one of the cups. In many ways, it kind of mirrors an awful lot of what I said to you last week. But I think it's a relevant conversation for us to have, not because we didn't cover it fully last week, but it is something that is very relevant. And I will say that there is a kind of attack to this, that it is all totally dependent on having an adequate summer window to be able to, in any way, attempt to accomplish participation in 4 competitions. But like I said last week, if we do get the summer that we're hoping for, and as many of the holes can be plugged, I stand by what I said, that if we can consolidate third place while actually closing the gap on those in the top 2 and making it look like it's competitive rather than just being there because other people were not good enough, as so many people like to frame it with Manchester United, I think that's a hell of a good season, particularly in Carrick's first full season in charge, is it not?
Yeah, and I think there's going to be things that he's going to have to accomplish that are not going to seem obvious right away in terms of United's progress, like making sure that the churn is, you're constantly improving. I think when United get to a summer where they only need 2 or 3 players, then I can be confident they're going to go challenge for the title. I think that's where I feel like, okay, we'll just need some finishing touches. You brought up a point last week. Very difficult to say definitively what would be successful, because you rightly pointed out, what if there's 2 teams that are just truly exceptional? Is it fair to say Carrick should be finishing above them and maybe third is acceptable next season? I don't know. That's something that'll constantly have to update. What I will say is this, Shaun, it can't be any worse than last season, because my marriage survived infidelity. It survived buying a Peloton for a birthday present for my wife, but it did not survive Ruben Amorim.
How was Peloton?
Bruno gets another assist for getting me out of my release.
We're in no way affiliated with Peloton, I will say, but how was that? Is that as good as it's marketed to be?
I have no idea, man. I just freewheel on it.
In the line of that question we were talking, I was just looking at it here. David Ellis had added another thing that is quite relevant. And again, it is totally set on who comes in the summer. but he's outlining how we need to evolve the way we play, and that has to be the number one priority. And it's a good point, because if there is proper attacking evolution in this football team that is consistent with keeping clean sheets more than we kept last year, then ultimately that should probably lead to success.
Yeah, football is as straightforward as that. I think the other thing that's unpredictable is what injuries do you need to get next season?
Correct.
Because this is where you can really get caught out, because that's where squads matter, depth. And it's hard enough to get a quality starting 11 that can win you the league. But this is where I feel like where we get to the 2 or 3 signing point. If you can have a squad where you're, because you'll have to look at every player and go, what if we lost that player for 3 months? Where would we be? And I think this is where I will give Arteta some credit, in the sense that, and even PSG to a point, where it's not so much about exceptional quality individuals, it's about a system. So if one player comes out, we can put another player in that minimizes the impact and puts less of a demand on the player to be a truly world-class football player, but you have to be a world-class team player. And I think that United aren't there yet. I think they have an 11 that's as good as anyone in the league on their day. Over a course of a 38-game season, they don't have the depth yet. And I don't think they'll get it this summer. I think it's also going to be, the question next summer will also be dictated by how well Shea Lacey does, by how well Tyler Fletcher does, Jack Fletcher, by how well one or two of these kids, because United have questions that they can provide the answers.
Yeah, 100%. The likes of Jim Thwaites and all that. And it leads to a very interesting situation with JJ Gabriel. I'm not entirely convinced that we are going to see him get massive game time with the seniors next year, because there's that whole advancement to becoming a Premier League 2 player. But we certainly will see him in the pre-season at some way, shape or form. And, myself and yourself, we ended up actually speaking to someone about how it's so completely irrelevant that when a 15-year-old posts videos of himself online training, that shouldn't be triggering people. That shouldn't be bringing people into the spotlight to start saying, I see this every single week with my young lads team. This is a child who's putting out, and it's a child who's just hit 20 plus goals for Manchester United. So it's slightly different than your son going out playing Sunday League with Adamstown.
I don't want to be a sanctimonious twat that's going to morally pontificate to people. Don't be right. He's a professional athlete, or will be, and this comes with the territory. And it is easy sometimes to forget he's 15, right? Yeah. When you're looking at what is essentially an avatar to you, he's a young Manchester United player, and you judge him as a young Manchester United player. But he is 15. He's not even old enough to play in the first team. He's not even a Manchester United first team player yet. And we're always quick to say throw in the kids. And I love watching United's under 18s and all that there. And then I remember this is why these games are not saturated all over the place. Because inevitably it puts a pressure on these young kids that they're not developed enough yet to deal with. And having spoken to the family members, Shaun, of people whose brother or uncle or son plays for United, and how that affects them, and then it eventually affects the player because it affects their million, is honestly, it's embarrassing. Because I think back to some of the stuff that I've said online for laughs and giggles about footballers. And my attitude is, I'm only one guy. But then you see the accumulation of that and the impact it has on a human being. I mean, no one wants to read that stuff about themselves. I just implore us all as a society, understand that this kid's mental health, this is a kid. The human brain wasn't designed, first of all, to deal with the judgment of millions of people on an electronic platform. It just wasn't, right? We were created to be social creatures within our tribes, but we're not designed to deal with that type of abuse. And imagine as a kid, like I'm almost 50 years of age. It took me a long time to learn how to deal with pointed abuse online. But I've had things said to me, Shaun, and I'm not trying to make myself out to be a victim. Everyone's had things said to them, but I've had things said to me. I'm glad your wife died over a football opinion, and you're like, what type? And in the beginning, I used to really hurt, and then after a while, I'm like, no. Think about what a human being's doing here. Think about what's going on in that person's life that provokes that type. Only a human being in enormous pain can put something like that out. Because if you're happy, you would never do it. And it's a reflection of the misery that we have in society. How social media pits us all against each other, algorithmically and competitively, and how so many people want things just because someone else doesn't have them, right? So that they can be better than you, whatever. My life, I'm very, very careful not to upload pictures of beautiful sun, because I don't want people to have this mythical perception of my life that I'm living in LA having some fucking wonderful, exotic experience. My life is filled with darkness, filled with shit, filled with pain, filled with happiness too, and love and lots of other things. But I don't like that perception that you're living in this wonderful life, and every life is hard. I get that. But I think about my own kids, and if I was to read people saying what they said about JJ Gabriel about my own child, I would seriously consider removing him from that place of employment. Especially when it's coming from people who support the club.
100%. And
it's a natural human reaction.
A natural reaction. And the long and the short of it, without me adding any more than that it needs to be, is just because a player is in the spotlight for Manchester United, just because a player earns a lot of money while playing for Manchester United, does not make it okay to say things, because they're still human beings. And, fundamentally, if you put it all back, and not even about 15-year-old JJ Gabriel, but any of the senior players, the world and their mother are against Manchester United people. Everybody's against Manchester United. So it's kind of our jobs as supporters to get behind our own, to support them, and to give them as much inspiration to perform on the football field as we possibly can. And therein, maybe things will get a little bit easier on a weekly basis when we start winning games regularly, and we stop targeting 15-year-old boys who are putting out videos of themselves playing football. And we can only hope that somehow we'll get towards that form of society in the future. But on that particular point,
or just on that, before
on that point, go for it.
Because this is important. I understand it's hard to have empathy when you're a starving man for someone at a banquet. I get that, right? When we're skint and we're looking at people with money, we don't want to have empathy. I understand that, and we always think if I had that money, all my problems in life would be solved. They probably would solve a lot of your problems, but I guarantee you, it's going to bring a significant amount of more problems that aren't in your life that you can't even think of. And I've interviewed footballers for 15 years, and I remember speaking to Craig Bellamy about this when he had started his academy in Sierra Leone, and he was going, "This is going to sound trite, but I missed being skint because there was authenticity in my life. I enjoyed the pursuit. I enjoyed you had incremental gains of accomplishment. If I could do this, I could." And the people around you were genuine. I'm not name dropping him. I mean this sincerely. When I was with Mike Tyson, same thing. I have no money, and this is now the happiest moment of my life, because all the people that weren't there for me but were there for what I could provide are no longer there. Those people destroy your soul. And now the people around me are people who have equal means, that don't have anything themselves, but don't ask me for anything. When you get that money, first year is great. You get the cars, you get the Ferraris, you get the houses, you get the jewelry, but then a human brain habituates that. And that feels as normal as your current circumstance. And then your family starts to fake because they think, I should have this, you should have that. Your second cousins, best friends, aunts, sisters, cousin wants a wedding and you have to pay for it. What? You only bought me a bottom of the line Ferrari? You tight bastard. You can't trust your friends because the friends you grew up with and love now sell things to the media about you. You bang into somebody when you're out, you get a physical or sexual assault charge. You have a bad day at work, you want to go have a meal, you can't. You called a piece of shit because you had the audacity to be a human. You want to go do something you enjoy, you're not allowed to do that after defeat. No one ever takes into consideration. Maybe we get a better performance out of a happy human being. And it's all motivated out of hatred because they make money. Right? They don't make money, Shaun, out of a community outreach program. They make money because they are enormously profitable and successful for the clubs they represent. Clubs are making money off them. So the money that goes towards buying new players is a residual of the money they're making off the players that you hate, who owe us nothing, who are professional athletes doing something consistently every single day that the majority of us could not do. Give them a little bit of leeway because they're human beings. And I understand that is caustic to some people because fuck, they've money, they've this, they don't get your empathy. Life's not transactional like that. And when you speak to them personally, and like any human being, you bond with someone and you no longer see them as an avatar, you see them as a human being with nuance, and you're confronted by some of the shit you've done yourself, me, it's embarrassing. And it's calibrated high. There's so many times I want to go on social media and just lay into a footballer, and I'm like, no. Amend this so that I think what happens if they read that or if their family reads that? Does this really convey my thoughts accurately or does it convey my mood? And so it's something that I think we have to be better to each other about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it stems outside of football, just into normal society as well. It's a massive failing, and I suppose I get lost saying this every single week that it's unfortunately something we can't solve sitting down here speaking. But
yeah,
if we can affect anyone who's listening, and especially what Phil is saying there, because he's absolutely right. There's no sense in me trudging over what he's just said and repeating the same thing in different ways. We just need to do better. And in society, we need to do better. But especially for Manchester United footballers, folks, the likelihood, if you're listening to this, is that you are a Manchester United supporter. Just support your players. Forget about damning them and forget about downing them on social media over every little bit, because every other supporter of every football club is already doing it. Just get behind your players. That's all I can say.
The two things that football it's fundamental to football survival are the players and the fans. Everything else they can do without. There's an abundance of scumbags making money in football that never lace up a pair of boots. Direct your anger at them. Fine. But at least the player's giving you something. At least the player's going on the pitch and giving you something back. They're not, a private equity company, right? They're not a shell company. They're not some ticket touting company. They're not someone that is a vulture picking on the carcass of the sport that provides nothing back. I don't even have even agents. Human beings are allowed to appoint people to represent them, and those representatives are not scumbags. I own an agency, right? So I full disclosure. But most of being an agent is life management, is being a life coach, talking to people at 2 a.m. who are going to do something stupid out of pain and suffering. There's a lot of scumbags in football, Shaun, that shouldn't be anywhere near it, that are the biggest contributing factors to clubs going out of business on it. Direct your anger at them because they're desperate to convince you that football is a business. Football is not a business. Football was an organic sport rooted in communities, built around communities that evolved and developed a financial element to it that became a commercial juggernaut. But this is really, really important because the definition of success has to always be football. It can't be profit. Otherwise, we lose football. Otherwise, we get the NFL. We get a sport has no jeopardy because businesses remove jeopardy. But then it becomes not worth watching. No risk, no reward. So we will have to push back on it. I say, oh, it's a business. It's not a fucking business. Now, America, we have sport as a business. So you get top down. So everything, there's no grassroots football. You want to play here, you have to pay. Everything has a barrier to entry that costs money. As a result, you get players that are paint by numbers that all look the same because their agency is immediately removed. Anything that you play football away from where you can't be monetized is a threat and discouraged. So you don't get facilities at grassroots level that produce players. You think that Messi was coached to be the player that he was? If coaching produced a Messi, we produce one every year, right? We can't. Coaching doesn't produce a Michael Jordan. Football is a heuristic. So to me, I think that we need to get back to a time where just because something isn't monetizable or transactional means it doesn't mean it has no value. And that's what we're at right now because that's what these billionaires do and these owners do. And we reluctantly accepted. What we see with players now has nothing to do with Pep Guardiola. It has to do with the iPad age. So I would encourage people, if on the pecking order, people to be kind to and to be angry at. The propinquity between players and fans is undeniable. We're both very special relationship. Everyone else is making money off the players and the fans.
Absolutely. I have nothing else to add to that, my man. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for giving us your time today. As always, the questions, the emails, the comments on social media, your time, it's all greatly appreciated. You can continue to send emails through to editor@theatre-of-red.com, and you can get in touch with us across all of our social medias. We will be more than happy to get back to you. And barring travesty, myself and this man will be back with you next week.
We'll be back. No problem. Thanks, folks, for all your downloads, listens, likes, retweets, support. Don't forget to subscribe. Both for our platforms. Much appreciated. Shaun, all the best, big man.
See you later, buddy.
See you later, mate.